You are listening to the Marketing Equation Podcast with Martin Shervington.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to be talking today with Fred, and I'm going to say your surname, and I'll probably butcher it. Thiel?
Correct.
Yay. About digitizing business. Fred, do you want to explain what you do, who you are?
Sure. So I've spent 30 plus years in the technology industry across pretty much every spectrum, from super mini computers, enterprise software, embedded firmware, digital media, online games, and everything in between, a lot of data communications also. And I spent some time in the late 90s developing some products that today we call the Internet of Things, but we were basically enabling the ability to connect things to networks. And the company I was running at the time, Lantronix, we went public in 2000 on the NASDAQ, and our business was embedding Internet IP technology into everything from alarm systems, lighting systems, industrial automation systems, consumer electronics products, whatever somebody wanted to connect to a network and monitor and manage. And so I've been very involved in that industry for many years, and now we've finally seen, after over 15 years, that what we believed aspirationally back then is now coming true, where people are finally seeing the benefits of connecting devices to networks so that they can get data off them. Yeah. And the fact that you now have readily available data, and everybody, thanks to the smartphone, carries a human-machine interface with them that is ubiquitous, you have an ability for everybody on the planet nearly to interact with all these billions of things that now are connected to networks. And so what are the benefits of that? Well, it means you can have very data-driven businesses. And when you have data-driven businesses, you can create very disruptive business models. Everybody, I think, is familiar with Uber. And it's amazing to think that Uber is able to control huge fleets of drivers and cars, yet they don't own any cars, and they don't actually employ the drivers. It's a very asset-light, very capital-efficient model. What they do is control the consumer, and they do it through what I call the 5 A's of disruption. And you'll note that the word disruption has no A's in it. But so basically, my belief is that if you look at any enterprise, if you're able to remove the friction from a process and automate that process, and you can accelerate the ability for somebody to do a process, you then gain competitive advantage. And if you add the ability for that product or service to be adaptive to the user's needs, so it can anticipate what the user is going to want, the user will start using it more. And then they will become more activated and will use it more and more, and they will start telling their friends and their colleagues about it, and they gain more and more value from the product or service.
So give me the A's. I'm going to make notes now. Go on.
Sure. So automate.
Yep.
Accelerate.
Yep.
Anticipate or adapt. It's a little flexible there.
Yeah.
Activate.
Yep.
And lastly, amaze. If you don't provide your consumer or your customer with an amazing experience, the only thing you've done is educated the market so a competitor can come in and do it better.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the last one is critical, because you have to give the customer an amazing experience. And what most people, when they talk about Uber, they think Uber's a technology company. Uber's not a technology company. Uber is a technology-enabled business. So they have digitized the transportation business and made a unique customer experience. Airbnb digitized the lodging business. They don't own any hotel rooms or apartments, yet with 1/100th of the staff of Starwood and Marriott combined, they control more lodging.
Yeah.
GE has become a digitized business by moving from selling these heavy assets, jet engines, turbines, and things, and renting them instead to the customer based on usage, because the data these systems generate is more valuable to the user than just the asset itself. And so in the case of a jet engine, GE is able to provide the pilots in flight with real-time feedback about how much power to use on the engine to conserve fuel and minimize maintenance expense. So that's a way that data is creating a feedback loop for the consumer or the customer. In other areas, it's about predictive maintenance and being able to predict when something is going to fail. And in a factory, a $10,000 pump or engine could potentially cause the shutdown of $1 million an hour factory. And so if you can predict when that's going to happen, you can replace the pump during a normal maintenance window and not have this unplanned downtime, which costs industries billions and billions of dollars a year.
So who are the businesses do you think that at the moment are most at risk?
So any business where there is friction in the process and that friction has created some form of competitive barrier to entry. So for example, automobile and health insurance typically have been very big companies who are able to have these systems that they need to manage billing and coding and ingestion of data from the doctors. These are businesses that today are being disrupted by hundreds of startups who are effectively understanding that if they can manage the process and simplify the process of claims processing, then they've taken the single largest cost out of their business, and they can then offer much more competitive insurance rates. So usage-based insurance, which you're starting to see in the automobile insurance industry, especially in the US, is becoming more and more prevalent. And it's basically, your risk is determined by how you drive. Therefore, we'll price our insurance to you based on not just how you drive, but how much you're driving. And we know how much you're driving. And because we know how you're driving, you tend to drive safer. And at the same time, the insurance industry is very scared with this whole concept of self-driving vehicles, because in the world of self-driving vehicles, blame is 100% on the vehicle. And because you have all this data about everything that happened, you have a 100% objective view of the incident. It's not I said, you said, it's this is what happened. And so it creates a world where if you look at who will own these fleets of self-driving cars, the vast majority of these cars will be owned either by the car manufacturers who are renting them to people like Lyft and Uber. And you might have noticed GM made a $500 million investment in Lyft to provide them with self-driving vehicles. And consumers will own fewer vehicles. Barclays Bank put out a report last year where they basically projected that the automobile OEMs, the manufacturers, will make 40% fewer vehicles within 10 years' time on an annual basis, because consumers will not want to own multiple vehicles, because Uber, for example, can deliver a driverless vehicle passenger mile, meaning you as a passenger would pay 25 cents a mile. You cannot own a car for that price. And the average American consumer only uses a car 4% of the time. So it's a very underutilized asset.
So it's interesting. I was in fact, the days that I met you, when I was in San Francisco, so I was in Hillsborough and doing Uber pool on the way up. And it's ridiculously priced. I mean, it was seriously something like $20 each way, and that was a $45 journey, a 45-minute journey. And it's like that's a good deal for the consumer. So as long as it's sustainable, then for my direct experience is, wow, this means I don't have to have a car when I'm in San Francisco.
Exactly. And for example, my behavior has changed. I no longer rent cars. I used to always rent a car because I didn't like the unpredictability of taxis. And I thought limousine services were too expensive. But now I can Uber whenever I want. And the ultimate convenience for me is I don't have to go down to the street corner and wonder when I'm going to get a car. I can order it a few minutes before I need it. I can see exactly when it's going to arrive. I know which car it is. It's just a very amazing customer experience.
Where do you think we're going with AI? Because that's a long time ago you were involved with the Internet of Things. So I'm assuming you're watching this with some excitement.
Yes. So if you think about what are the challenges in the world of the Internet of Things? Well, one big challenge was you needed a ubiquitous human-machine interface, which the smartphone has solved for us. And as you look at AI, what it's going to do, and what it's already starting to do in many places, is eliminate the need for us to make a lot of decisions relative to what we need, and also anticipate our needs. I mean, most people who have an iPhone or an Android phone today are experience with the fact that the phone starts telling them, hey, there's heavy traffic, you need to leave 20 minutes earlier for your appointment. That's artificial intelligence at work. And what ends up happening is as systems leveraging machine learning learn more about us, then they can anticipate our needs, and they can start making decisions that eliminate options in a positive way for us. And a big area that you'll see this is in this concept called chatbots. Chatbots are basically leveraging some artificial intelligence and machine learning to monitor a chat stream. So you and your mates are texting about, hey, let's go to this movie tonight, let's maybe eat some Chinese food, and at the top of the chat window will come a little thing saying, hey, best Chinese restaurant near your movie theater is XYZ. And they have a special tonight on this, click here for a coupon, and then it might ask you want me to reserve a table for you. I see there are 6 of you in this chat window. How many people do you want to have for dinner? Yeah. Or reserve the movie tickets in advance, start telling you, prompting you information as you're texting your mates. And so what ends up happening is this now shifts the consumer's interface with systems away from traditional search. This is why Google is so scared of this. Because as you disintermediate the search window from the consumer by using artificial intelligence and virtual assistants, you move into a world where you're disintermediating Google and Facebook from the consumer experience. And for example, over 45% of American adults, American users of Apple iPhones use Siri to some extent every day. And a lot of that is where is, what time, how many, how much. There's all things you would normally be searching on Google, where it would normally bring up a search window that would be filled with ads that you would click on and Google would get paid for. When Siri searches, it's not showing you results that are paid ads. It's showing you results. And you pick a result, and Google is not getting a click fee for that. As a matter of fact, Google pays Apple for the right to display search results through Siri. Yeah. So, and if you talk to some of the analysts, they firmly believe that Facebook Messenger, which effectively is a chat tool, will be much bigger than Facebook itself within just a few years' time. Yeah. And if you've been following the trends, you see the age of Facebook users has shifted to a much older demographic, and the younger kids aren't using Facebook, they're now using Snapchat. And so I think as we get more and more to a world where we have virtual assistants, that is all built on AI. Self-driving cars have a huge amount of AI built into them. Our transportation system, our power grids, if you have a Nest thermostat, you have AI around you. And I think AI will become hugely prevalent around us in just a few years' time, making our lives easier, simpler. I don't have a fear of Skynet and AI taking over things anytime soon, because that's a much larger challenge technologically than most people assume. But I think that AI is very much here to stay. And even if you're an enterprise software developer, you really have to start thinking about how can I leverage AI and machine learning so that the system starts learning from its users and starts automating those tasks so a user doesn't have to do them. And the example I often use is somebody who's entering orders in a system. The AI can process those orders based on seeing how the user does it, and over time can just say to the user, hey, I processed all the orders that you had to process. Here were the exceptions. Tell me how you want me to do these. And then over time, the exceptions are no longer exceptions because it has learned how to handle them. That user no longer has to process orders. So, we're entering a world where we will soon see a displacement of a lot of clerical positions that will be moving to having to move to more creative, sort of more conceptual type jobs, so that one thing AI does not do well is invent or be creative yet. And so the whole humans have a very unique ability to think about a problem and solve a problem in non-linear ways, and that's something that AI is still not quite well designed for.
There's hope for me yet. There's hope. Just for
yes,
3 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One more thing. I'm just going to jump back to amaze, because I think it's a great word in your 5 A's relating to disruption, and it makes me think of marketing, which is the realm that I'm very much in. I mean, do you see trends in marketing and sort of appreciate those trends from the outside, or are you more actively involved in
So in the world of marketing, it comes down to a couple of things. On the one hand, you need to, and I did a video about this when I was running local corporation a few years back. You need to be able to present a relevant message to a consumer in a context where they're receptive to it. And if you think about what programmatic retargeting has done, you're trying to, somebody has searched for something, they're interested in that, and when you find that individual on the web, even though it's a non-related website, you can place an ad in front of them that, in theory, they should be interested in because they were searching for it.
Yeah.
That is kind of Jurassic period modern marketing in my mind. I think what we're going to start seeing much more is all this data that we generate. Our smartphones are constantly telling systems where we are, what we're doing, will enable marketers to be able to target consumers in very subtle ways when they are receptive to messages. And the systems will know you're receptive to messages because you start interacting with messages. And the huge amount of behavioral data which marketers have available that systems haven't yet been able to really crunch effectively will take marketing to a whole different level, where, if you're familiar with the term neuromarketing, which is leveraging the real programming language of the human brain, NLP, to create marketing that really triggers responses. You now get to a place where, through all this data and available information, people can be persuaded, I don't want to use the word manipulated, but persuaded to look at things and explore and respond to things in ways that aren't having to sit through a 30-second commercial on TV that you've seen 67 times. And so I think you're going to see much more product placement type marketing shifting from an ad to, you're going to be bombarded with brand messages through watching content where that brand somehow has insinuated itself into the content.
Yeah. Interesting you say about NLP. I trained in NLP 17 years ago. So I'm very familiar with that territory. And I think you're right. I think that there's so many subtle ways to get top of mind that aren't being used yet because the dots haven't really been connected.
Yep,
so,
exactly.
Awesome. Fred, I really enjoyed that. I could go on for longer, but I'm going to leave you to your day. Where can people find you?
So you can find me at About Me. Just look for Fred Thiel on About Me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Fred Thiel on LinkedIn or Facebook, Fred Thiel.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Equation Podcast, brought to you by PlusYourBusiness.com and Effective.fm.